Hi, everybody. Welcome to Happy Hour Live on Brew Sports. We welcome you inside the studio on a Monday edition of the show. An exciting time in the sports world. Tom Brady's jersey's been found. The NCAA is just losing its mind. And, of course, the sports world never seems to stop surprising us. Tim Tebow, of course, that's a whole other topic. We're not even going to bother with Tim Tebow today. That's how much sports stuff there is to be talked about today. We've got a great show for you in store today. We're going to be joined by Christian Heimall later on in the program to talk about the NCAA tournament. But first, I need to introduce you to the wonderful gentlemen joining me on the show today. I'm joined by Dave Pentek and Scott Wisniewski. Good afternoon to you, gentlemen. How are we doing today?
I'm doing quite well. Good afternoon.
Good to see you.
Yeah, it's first day of spring. How can you not be doing good?
I know. And Dave's the only one that got the short sleeves memo today. If it's the first day of spring, I've heard people are wearing shorts and flip-flops and all this other crazy stuff today.
If you haven't been outside, it's been outstanding. Yes.
That's what I've heard. I don't. I have not been outside yet today. I've been inside since 6 a.m., so I don't know what it's like outside there, Dave. It's a little terrifying, but I'm hopeful to get outside at some point today. Well, gentlemen, we've got a great show in store for folks today. We, like I said, are going to be talking to Christian Heimall in just a little bit about the NCAA. We do want to remind all of you, of course, to give us your comments, give us your feedback about everything that we're doing on the show today as well. Comment in the section below here on the live video. Hit that share button as well, too, so that way more people can check out all the great action that we've got taking place on the program today. The first big thing that I want to talk to both of you guys about today centers around the NCAA tournament, and very near to our hearts are the Wisconsin Badgers, of course, as we are here in the state of Wisconsin. But the big topic that has been floating around right now is, were the Badgers underseeded? Was Xavier underseeded because of the success that they've been having? And right now, the way you look at it, with the way the Badgers have taken down Villanova, some folks are saying, well, who cares if they were underseeded, because we just beat the #1 team in the country. But what are your thoughts when you hear these people making these arguments, saying, well, the Badgers, especially because we hear that the most here in Wisconsin, of course, were underseeded and it affected them in the tournament? What do you take away from something like that?
Well, I mean, they were underseeded, but I mean, to some people's point, you're right. You still have to win 6 games. It doesn't matter what order you win them in. But it's just hard for me, and I remember watching on Selection Sunday, how you can justify Minnesota, who worst record, worst RPI, lost to the Badgers, Maryland lost to the Badgers, struggled down the stretch just like Wisconsin, and justify them being a 5 and 6 respectively, and the Badgers being an 8. I thought the Badgers played poorly down the stretch, somewhat redeemed themselves in the first 2 rounds of the tournament, the Big Ten tournament. It should have been a 6.
Yeah.
So for them to be an 8 and have to play on a seed line lower than that, and then being on the same seed line as the #1 overall seed, which was Villanova, yeah, they were clearly underseeded.
I think you look at it, too, and I've kind of pointed this out to Wisconsin fans, too, and folks are saying, like, oh, Minnesota was seeded way too high. And I'm like, well, would you have rather have been a Minnesota 5 seed? Because you would have had to have gone through a Butler. You would have had to have gone through eventually a UCLA, Kentucky, or UNC. Personally, I'm glad the committee, screwed the Badgers in that sense, being like, oh, my gosh, why'd they seed them so high? Because I don't think we'd be having this conversation right now if Wisconsin would have been in Minnesota's shoes. They might not have even, been fighting for a chance to be in the Sweet 16 at this point as well, too.
Do you think that the Badgers would have had the 8 seed if they would not have gotten to the championship of the Big Ten? If they would have lost the first or second game, could they have dropped all the way down to a 10? Maybe even worse?
That would have been even more ridiculous. I really, I understand sometimes, even though they won't admit to it, the committee likes matchups. I think maybe the Buzz Williams matchup in the first round, and then that primetime afternoon slot, if they get by Virginia Tech, they know they could seat Villanova, the defending champs, against Wisconsin. I think that might have played some of it. But, yeah, I suppose. I mean, Michigan State got a 9. So I suppose if the Badgers would have lost, they could have dropped at least 1 seed, if not 2. But, I tend to just not understand sometimes some of the logic that goes into it, because one year they'll tell you, well, we're looking at this because their RPI was this and this and this. And the next year they go, well, we really didn't look at RPI. We looked at this metric and this metric. I guess as a fan or just as an observer or somebody who commentates on things like this, I just want to know what the formula is. I want to know what the criteria is. And I think they should be a little bit more revealing and not speak in a lot more generalities like they do. I think we should just be able to say they were an 8 because of this. And if it's because you like the matchup better, then just say it. I just think it's funny. The Badgers drop down to 8. They lose a chance to play in Milwaukee. But South Carolina, who was a 7, gets basically home court advantage. They beat Marquette and beat Duke in front of all their fans.
Yeah, that's the big thing for me too, and we've kind of expressed that frustration on the shows all throughout the last couple of days. Is what exactly classifies you as a 1 seed? What classifies you as an 8 seed? There's no rule book that says if you lose or win this many games and beat this many top 25 teams, you for sure fit into this mold. It's all, I feel like, a personal opinion and about the views. It's like, well, yeah, absolutely. If Marquette would have won and they would have had to go take on Duke, that's going to be a big thing. Northern Kentucky, FSU, FGCU. Like, I get it. I was mad about it in the beginning because I'm like, why are these teams playing each other? But then the more you look at it from a ratings perspective and trying to get more fans to games, it of course makes more sense, but it does frustrate you for teams that it doesn't directly affect.
Yeah, but see, here's the argument, because I had this argument with somebody the other day as well. First of all, obviously they didn't take head-to-head into account, but nonetheless, somebody said the same thing. It's about ratings. People are going to watch anyway. It's March Madness.
Yeah.
The brackets have made this it doesn't matter who's playing. People care. Non-fans come out to watch their brackets and watch their brackets get broken or get through the first 2 days and go, yeah, I can still win because I picked the team with the best colors. Whatever it is, there's so many non-fans that watch this tournament. I don't think you have to try to craft it to get the matchups you want because people are going to tune in anyway.
Do you think the media had anything to do with it?
In what regards?
Well, everybody says the Big Ten's down.
Yeah.
The Big Ten is down. They're not as good as they have been in the past. And they keep saying it, they keep saying it, they keep saying it. Now the selection committee says, you know what, well, the Big Ten is down a little bit, so we're not going to give Wisconsin that 3, 4, 5 seed. We're going to put them at an 8.
I guess it depends on who you talk to. That's really the big issue, I feel like, with a lot of this, is you sit there and you look at how much the media drives anything in the world, regardless if it's sports, entertainment, politics, anything. I mean, if the world says that if the media says Donald Trump's a bad president, well, everybody to an extent believes that he's a bad president. If the world says that, Mick Jagger's the greatest musician ever, well, then most people are going to follow the media saying that as well, too, similar to sports as well. The Big Ten is down. Well, it's going to play a huge effect on the people making the decisions. And I do agree with you. I do think the media, to an extent, plays a large role in how, whether or not they will ever admit that, the committee actually makes a decision. But I think going forward, they have to get more solidified with what classifies people, even for like the 1 through 4 seeds, because arguably those are the biggest ones overall that people have to find a way to slot into. But 5 through 16 is really just kind of a crapshoot to an extent. But how much of a difference is Providence compared to what Minnesota did or Northwestern?
Absolutely, and how important are conference tournaments? Because you'll hear them say it's not important, but then North Carolina, because North Carolina lost and they still got a 1. So it's not that important. But then other teams, they go, well, we bumped them up because they had a good conference tournament. Does it matter or doesn't it matter? And just tell us whether it matters or not, so we can kind of play along at home and go, oh yeah, that makes sense. I understand the logic to that. Because otherwise it just makes it feel like everything else about the NCAA, even though this is far more pure than the college football side of it, it still makes it seem seedy and political, and you just don't understand what they looked at. And I just wish they'd be a little bit more open about that, because there's just too much about the NCAA that bothers me, and this is a small piece of that.
Who is the selection committee?
Is old coaches and media? Is that what it is?
It's athletic directors from and conference heads from a lot of the major conferences.
Do they all stay the same? I mean, I don't know enough about the selection committee to say that.
Yeah, nor do I, honestly. I've always been curious about that, because I know for football it's a lot of old retired folk or old coaches. Very rarely do you find, like, Nick Saban's not sitting on the college football committee being like, hey guys, I really think Alabama's doing great this year. Like, that's not her. Like, Barry Alvarez is on that committee, and it's old athletic directors or current ones too.
Sure.
Among conference heads, basically.
Yeah, and it rotates a little bit, but it's much like that when we talk about football. It's much like that because you have the power conferences that are more heavily represented, but apparently whoever was representing for the Big Ten didn't have a loud enough voice, I guess, this year. So
I guess not. But as we mentioned, the ignorance of the committee has been the joy of the Badgers thus far, because if you look at what Wisconsin, among others, has to go through, they have to go through Florida and then either Baylor or South Carolina. Hypothetically, you'd like to think that's a better route than having to potentially deal with UNC, UCLA, or Kentucky. I would take having to go through those 3 earlier mentioned teams than heading to those 3 teams, honestly.
I agree. But the Badgers this year, what's been maddening about them is we've seen them play with the ability to play with anybody and with the ability to lose to anybody.
Yes.
So I'd like
true.
to say,
Yes.
oh yeah, Florida, that's way easier, but they could come out and lay the proverbial egg on Friday and lose that game by 15 points if their shots aren't falling and people getting a foul job. So who knows? But yes, you're right. On paper, the route's way easier than if they would have been seated in the other half of the bracket.
I mean,
you're right.
Looking at my bracket, I'm so glad that Duke's out. I've never been a Duke fan, and I take, obviously, South Carolina's chances against Wisconsin. I'll take Wisconsin any time if we get that far, but obviously got to get past Baylor first.
Right.
I mean,
that is the big thing, honestly, is if you are Wisconsin and you're looking at the route ahead, you hope that if you can get through Florida, then Baylor, South Carolina. I think that Baylor South Carolina game is going to be intriguing. Honestly, I think with the way South Carolina's kind of stormed out of the gate there and put a beat down on Marquette, and then upset Duke, and now has a chance to showcase it against Baylor, who hasn't really been tested. I mean, USC kind of pushed him a little bit, and New Mexico State was just glad to be in the tournament, let's be honest. Now I feel like that Baylor-South Carolina game is going to get a lot more press and a lot more attention surrounding it going forward.
Yeah, I was happy with the way the weekend played out because let's be honest, Thursday and Friday, there weren't very many surprises. There weren't a whole lot of shockers. There were two what you would consider upsets, both of them involving Big Ten schools. But then you started to see some of those powerhouses fall on Saturday and Sunday, Louisville losing, Duke losing. Mm-hmm. So at least now you have that bracket that everybody hopes for. We have some of the power teams and some of the Cinderellas, and you can kind of enjoy the rest of it and see how it plays out. Because nobody ever likes to see, which is one of the biggest problems I've had with women's basketball for years, it's chalk, 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 chalk. And it's usually 15 out of the top 16 teams that are playing in a Sweet 16. This at least gives you some of that variety, and we finally saw some of that this weekend.
That's true. One quick comment here on Facebook before we get to our correspondent, Christian Heimall. Chris says, the formula is never the same. It changes from year to year. The reality is that they try to give us the sexy matchups. As much as we like upsets, no one really wants a non-power team past the Sweet 16.
Mm-hmm.
That makes total sense.
I believe that.
I totally agree with Chris's thoughts on that one, in all honesty, and it's a good thought.
I think Wisconsin, though, by the way, and I'm not the Wisconsin homer. I graduated from UWM. But I enjoy Badger basketball. I enjoy Badger football. But that they're the only school right now, 20 years in a row, have had an NCAA tournament bid and a bowl bid.
Really?
Yep. So,
wow, I did not know
But yet
that.
they never really get talked about as a powerhouse because they haven't won a championship yet in either sport. But they're a perennial top 10, top 15 team in both sports, it seems, year in and year out.
That is absolutely incredible. Well, another man that knows a lot about the college basketball world is Christian Heimall, and he is one of our fantastic correspondents here on the Brew Sports Network, and he joins us now on Happy Hour. Christian, good afternoon to you, sir. How are we doing today?
Wonderful, guys. How are you? Happy day of spring.
Thank you. Happy day of spring to you as well, too. We've heard rumors, Christian, you've been spotted in flip-flops and a soccer jersey. Are you feeling okay?
Flip-flops, a pair of shorts, and a U.S. soccer jersey. Yes, that is what I've been spotted in today. 65 degrees in the Quad Cities in Davenport, Iowa. So it's a nice day. A little windy on the Mississippi River, but other than that, it's nice.
Well, it sounds like it's just absolutely beautiful there for the first day of spring. So, Christian, first and foremost, I have to ask you, how are you dealing with the success of the Michigan Wolverines right now? And just in general, how are you dealing with the madness that took place the last 4 days in the college basketball world?
I'm having a lot of fun with it, honestly. Yes, as a Louisville fan, a little upset to see Michigan. I know, Baxter, you and I have talked about this a couple of times. You've got the Wolverines going pretty far. And I have said it a couple of times here on this program that I consider Michigan a lot like UConn a couple of years ago, but they don't have a Kemba Walker. Derek Walton is clearly listening and trying to prove me wrong. But they played a very strong game yesterday. They are very I like John Beilein as a coach. You talk to some folks around Canisius College where he was beforehand. They love what he was able to do there. And listen, that Louisville team, they were tremendous, a very talented squad, but only had one senior. And that kind of makes it even scarier for Louisville next year when they hopefully everybody comes back. They only graduate Mango Mathiang. They're one of their big forwards. But, just to go back what you guys were touching on a little bit, when you compare certain teams, you look at Louisville, a team 24-8, 12-6 in the ACC, didn't win their conference tournament, didn't reach the semifinals of their conference tournament. And then you go to a team like Maryland, 24-8, 12-6 in their conference, and they get all the way knocked down to a 6 seed. So It's a little interesting to see how the seeding goes. I think that one, I thought the Midwest region was the most dangerous region of any one that you had. It turns out that it's one of only two where the number one seed is still alive, though. So we'll see.
You know, we were talking about teams that where they were seeded and where they played out. But I guess my question for you would be, if you look at the field right now, it's kind of a two-part question. Which of the number ones that are still left are most likely to get upset in the Sweet 16? And of the remaining teams, which is the quote-unquote Cinderella that's got the best chance to advance to the Final Four?
If you're talking about Sweet 16, number one's going down. I think the best chance for that, even though it's going to hurt me to say it, is Kansas. I have Kansas winning the national title. I think they are the best team in the NCAA tournament. I thought that from the beginning. But the way Purdue has played these first couple of games, they are one of the more talented. And that's nothing against Butler. But if you're talking about what North Carolina has been able to do, and yes, in my opinion, they got the benefit of the doubt against Arkansas, to be able to come away with that victory. But I think Kansas has, out of those two, Kansas UNC in the Sweet 16, I think Kansas has the bigger shot of being upset. That being said, I think the Kansas Jayhawks have the best chance of still advancing. I don't see, and this is where the South gets really weird to me, I don't see how North Carolina gets past Kentucky or UCLA. In my opinion, that Sweet 16 game between the Bruins and the Wildcats is for the regional championship. I could be wrong. But, I love both of those teams, UCLA and Kentucky. I don't like that game is going to have to be a Sweet 16 game. I would love for that to be a Final Four game. But either way, if Kansas can get past Purdue, I see they have an easier road past whether it be Michigan or Oregon than UNC would against a Kentucky or UCLA.
Talking with Christian Heimall here on Happy Hour. Christian, you're down in the Iowa area right now. What's the general buzz about how Iowa State fared? I know they lost by 4 to Purdue, but overall, though, Iowa State, I feel like, is always one of those teams that people get either too hyped about or just forget about, in all honesty. But what are you hearing down in your general area about how the Cyclones did?
You know, it's interesting. This area is a little bit more Hawkeye Nation, so they were a little bit more focused on the NIT, which also didn't go too well for them. But the Cyclones, you're right. I mean, ever since Fred Hoiberg turned them into a little bit of a better style in the Big 12 and a little bit more relevant in that area, they're an interesting team, and I like watching them. But the problem is they were one of those ones that I thought was a little bit too – I thought they were seated a little bit higher than they should have been. I don't know if they were a 5. I would have loved to have seen them and Michigan kind of swap places. I thought that would have been an interesting seed line to see the Wolverines play Nevada and then Purdue, and then see, Iowa State having to go against Oklahoma State and eventually Louisville. Excuse me. But back to the other question, I know we were talking about teams still left as a Cinderella. If you're watching for one, it's got to be South Carolina still. Mm-hmm. I love them in the East after beating Duke. I mean, you look at what they've done just the last 2 second halves. 54 points against Marquette, 65 points in the second half against Duke. They shot 74% yesterday after halftime. To do that in the NCAA tournament is unheard of. So I like South Carolina as the team to still surprise people, the Cinderella, quote unquote, to watch the rest of this tournament. But yeah, I mean, listen, in this area, it's a lot more Hawkeye Nation. But Iowa State still, job well done getting into the tournament. As long as you can get there, that's kind of the biggest thing to keep the program where it is. And that's the most important part. When you talk about March, is can you sustain your program's success? You guys brought up Wisconsin, 20 straight years in the NCAA tournament. You're sustaining success. Now the next step is to get up and get a couple of trophies.
Christian, you were talking about, the upsets, and you talk about the Cinderella teams. ESPN has been putting out the idea of potentially reseeding when they get to the Sweet 16. What are your thoughts on reseeding or the idea of reseeding past the round of 64 or 32?
I listen, if they do it in the NHL. I know they do that for Stanley Cup playoffs. They reseed after that first round. But if you look at I was reading it earlier today too. The 1 through 16 now, if you go and redo that, Kansas obviously gets the number 1 there. But then my issue is, are you swapping regions? Are you just reseeding within your own region? What are you doing there? Because are you going to put Kansas against Michigan and then Purdue against Oregon? Or are you going to go Kansas is the number 1 overall seed, and now you've got to move South Carolina over to play Kansas instead? There's too many logistics of it I love the way it's set up because you can sit there after each round and go, we were just saying this last week on College Road Trip. We were just saying this paves the way for Duke now. Duke, now that SMU is out, SMU had the best chance to upset Duke. And we were saying how it's wide open and Nova was gone, so Duke's going to win the region. And now all of a sudden Duke loses and you're sitting there going, the East is wide open. You've got Florida, Wisconsin, Baylor, and South Carolina at Madison Square Garden for a regional championship. It's wide open. This is why we love March Madness, is for things like this to happen where nobody knows exactly how it's all going to pan out. I don't like the idea of reseeding. I think reseeding is the apologists' response for the NCAA selection committee. To sit there and go, yeah, you know what? Their selections were pretty bad, but what if we started doing this? And it's an idea that doesn't need to get put into our heads. It's never going to happen, much like McGregor Mayweather. Let's just stop talking about it and move on and play the games.
But there's so much money that could be made. Do it.
It won't happen. It will never happen. But let's leave it as it is because, listen, it's been good for 79 years. Why change it?
Well, that's why ESPN's not relevant anymore. But so I want to go back to Iowa State for a minute, and maybe this is a personal agenda of mine because I, in Milwaukee, covered city sports here for a long time. Burton is a beast. Where do you see him on the next level? I mean, is this a guy who can be a contributor in the NBA?
It's tough to say that. I mean, anytime you have someone with his type of presence and his ability to do 4 or 5 different things, whether it be shoot, whether it be rebound, defend, on the ball, off the ball, it's so tough to do. The problem with, and this has always been my issue, watching mid-major basketball as up close as I have for the last 10 years almost, the NBA, and then watching the big power conferences on TV or even in person when I get the opportunity to, the NBA and the college game are so completely different. If you watch an NBA game, it's rare that you see the type of foul calls that you would in the NCAA. Put it this way. If LeBron James actually played in college, not only would he average 40 points a night, he'd be taking 70 free throws a game because of how often the foul is called on a drive to the basket. In the NBA, guys are getting mugged, and it's not happening. But at the same time, in the NBA, it's much more of a one-on-one game, as opposed to there are very few teams. The Celtics do it. Greg Popovich in San Antonio has always done it, where it's a team style and it's a little bit more of a motion offense. The rest of the league is very much, almost like a pickup game of the best players in the world. There, you got guys stepping out and taking guys isolation with 20 seconds left on the shot clock from 40 feet out. So it's tough to tell how guys will translate. Especially, I think the problem with him is he's hidden in that school. I don't know if he's going to make it, especially with all these freshmen coming out. You look at even if a guy like Markkanen at Arizona, if that freshman comes out, it's just another spot for him to get hidden behind. He's going to have to end up in the D-League or overseas to continue his career. But it really is so tough to sit there because you got to remember, in the NBA draft, there's only 2 rounds. And unless you were taken in the first round, you're not guaranteed a roster spot. So there really are only 30 spots available in the draft. And I don't know if he's one of those top 30 guys.
Christian, we appreciate your insights, Sarah. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. For fans of yours, which I know there are just droves of fans, they get to see you again in about 45 minutes or so, basically, when you'll be on College Road Trip tonight again?
Yeah, College Road Trip tonight. Like you said, about 45 minutes and getting ready to somehow wrap our heads around what's going to be a really fun and entertaining Sweet 16.
I got one quick one for you.
Yeah.
Out of the Quad Cities, is there a rivalry? Like, does Moline hate Dubuque? Does Benton, is Davenport the best? Like, how does that work out? What's the dynamic?
It's weird. I haven't been here long enough to figure it out just yet. I do know one thing. A lot of Chicago Cubs fans. That's about all I know. The Cubs reign supreme over here. Iowa Hawkeyes are big, obviously. I'm still trying to learn a little bit more, though, about which side of the fence I want to lean on for certain things. What's fun is there's a minor league baseball team in Davenport, and then across the river there's an ECHL hockey team in Moline. So you kind of got the best of both worlds, I guess, if you're a fan of both of those sports.
Phenomenal, Christian. Well, we appreciate you taking the time tonight, and we'll see you again here on College Road Trip in just a little while. So we'll look forward to talking to you again then.
My pleasure, guys. Take care.
All right, we'll talk to you soon. There goes Christian Heimall, one of our college sports insiders here on the Brew Sports Network. Always great to hear from him. Any other final takeaways from anything that Christian said about either the seedings or I did find it funny he kind of laughed off your comment about the whole like reseeding the top 16. I heard about that for the first time today too, and I was like, that is an interesting thing to think about. But then he kind of answered all the questions I had about it with like, well, do you just completely reseed the regions? Do you reseed the entire tournament? How does that work? And it really is just ESPN trying to come up with content, I feel
Absolutely. They've got all these hours to fill with nonsense. So
yeah, it's true.
They want to have the sexy, matchups.
Yes.
And if they wanted to reseed it, then they could potentially put those. But it's not called March Madness for any other reason. It's madness for that reason specifically.
So if you don't have the madness,
let's have it.
Why bother? Exactly. Dave, you actually got some love here on Facebook. Ooh. Kurt says, shout out to Dave, go Bulldogs.
Thank you.
So
there
you go. Representing the Cedarburg Bulldogs,
yes,
Mr. Dave Pentek. Transitioning out of the college basketball world now into the world of the NFL, although the draft itself is still about a month away, the NFL still continues to be relevant, but it really has nothing to do with anything going on in the offseason in terms of offseason moves. The big story today centers around the crazy chaos that was Super Bowl 51 and the Tom Brady jersey fiasco. Apparently it's been found. Apparently the stolen jersey's been found. Apparently the jersey that he wore when they beat the Seahawks has been found, but they weren't found like in Dubuque, Iowa. They were found in Mexico. Apparently an international media credentialed member walked in to the locker room after the Super Bowl and just grabbed the jersey and walked right out.
So my question is, how do they know that's the actual jersey? Are they doing DNA tests
sweat
on the jersey?
Thing. They're like trying to run these tests basically, but I'm like, what do you do? Do you show it to Tom? Be like, is this it? Be like, yep, that's it. Like, still smells like Tom. Like, what if you washed it? Like, how do you know? How do we know this isn't some like fake jersey from China or something that they bought for $20 on a random website? Like, how do we know this is the jersey?
Do you think he gets fined if he doesn't turn it back in? Like at the end of,
I don't know.
So like
I feel like you get to keep your jerseys. Like Aaron Rodgers has his Super Bowl jersey, so I feel like if you win a Super Bowl, you don't have to like turn it into the team.
It's like
at the end of the
being a senior. You get to keep it.
They put
See, that's the difference. In our school, we don't. If you're a senior,
I didn't get to keep any of my jerseys in high school either.
Otherwise, you can't graduate.
But here's
they hold that against you.
Brutal. Goodness.
Here's the thing I wanted to point out is as much of us. Focus on security the NFL has, and it's much like in some cases like the Secret Service running it. How does that happen?
Yeah,
like seriously, I've covered NFL games, regular season games, and it's almost impossible to get away with anything. But yet somehow somebody just grabbed the jersey and walked out, and nobody noticed.
Like they released a video too. Like the media member that they're allegedly assuming did it. You see him like kind of walk in with the team, and like it's obviously they just won the Super Bowl, so there's people kind of filing in and out. So it's not like it's just one guy walking in, like looking around and grabbing it. He kind of comes in the shuffle, kind of grabs it and walks out. But how do you not notice someone that one of these things doesn't belong here? How do you not notice a gentleman in the locker room in a suit going, thank you, and walking out?
And what did you expect to do with it? Because if you put it on eBay or online, it's like, I have the game-worn jersey. Okay, you've just outed yourself. We're coming to get. Like, it's like stealing a rare diamond and then putting it on, like, Twitter. Like, hey, I've got this diamond. You want to buy it?
Yeah, exactly. It's like, just rob the Lou. Here's the Mona Lisa. Who wants it? Like, what are you going to do with it? You're going to put it up in your house and be like, oh, that's the Mona Lisa from my 2007 heist. Like, I don't understand the reason for it.
Did you also see the people that were involved in finding this? They legitimately said the FBI and law enforcement was used to find this jersey. Are you telling me that there is not better resources for money for the FBI or law enforcement to put towards other things than finding Tom Brady's football jersey? Are you kidding me?
But this is why the NFL is the only 365-day-a-year sport, because of that kind of attention. I don't think anybody would have cared if Kurt Schilling's bloody sock got stolen. The FBI wouldn't have been looking for it, but it's the NFL, and anything the NFL does, people care about. Good or bad, good publicity, bad publicity, jerseys getting stolen, their schedule being unveiled, people running around in shorts and getting timed for 40 times. Like, people watch the combine, for crying out loud.
Why? I never understood that.
I never got that either. But it's the NFL. It's somehow tied to the NFL, so we have to watch it.
It's a $9 billion nonprofit business, which makes no sense.
Really?
I know. Technically, it's a nonprofit organization that makes $9 billion a year. All donations, I'm sure. But the biggest thing, like, if you look at it, and I agree with you. I was going to bring up the point that you just made. But, like, if I'm the FBI director and I'm looking at my caseload, I'm like, let's see, bombing over there, murder here, Tom's 5th Super Bowl jersey. yeah, we got to get Tom's jersey back. Like, we'll get to the, people died. We'll get to that. But Tom's jersey, like, that's number 5, man.
Probably
like,
more
you gotta
Giselle right now.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, I feel like I wonder if Roger Goodell purposely tried to like run interference. Maybe this was his last thing to like stick it to Brady. Be like, look, I'm gonna get a guy that I can burn that's gonna steal the jersey, and I could see Roger like lighting it on fire or something, being like, there, Brady, I finally got you. But I doubt that's the actual bit, of course. You never know that with Roger.
You never know.
He's everywhere. Barry says, I bought a $20 jersey once. Trust me, the quality was a little lacking. So maybe, I mean, I've seen good jerseys, I've seen bad jerseys, but overall, I'm sure not the best quality.
Absolutely.
David also says FBI must have been bored. Clearly, all the other crimes must have been solved. Right, because I'm sure if we went to the FBI most wanted list right now, that we would see all solved instead of on the hunt for. Basically, it's just funny. Things like this dominate the news. If it's not Tom Brady, it's Tim Tebow. I feel like there's always something exactly, and then people would get that reaction like, can we not? Like,
and let me just say this without getting too sidetracked, because we said we weren't going to talk about him. I have no opinion about Tim Tebow, good or bad, but ESPN made it 3 years of a news cycle because of Tim. Hey, Tim Tebow was in a mall today. Hey, Tim Tebow bought socks. Hey, Tim Tebow had the flu today and ordered chicken soup. Who cares? Like, who cares?
It's true. You're absolutely right about that. I mean, and we'll probably talk about it a lot more tomorrow on the network as a whole about him getting sent down to single-A minor league baseball. So I'm sure that'll be a hot news story that'll dominate all of Brew Sports tomorrow. One of the other things I want to talk about, too, and this is a little bit outside of my wheelhouse because I'm a little bit younger, but Dwight Clark, a phenomenal wide receiver in the NFL, played his entire career with the 49ers, recently announced over the weekend that he has been diagnosed with ALS. And of course, those that know what ALS does is certainly a scary disease. Dwight Clark is 60 years old. He was saying over the weekend, he's like, I can't run, play golf, or walk any distances. He says picking up anything over 30 pounds is now a chore. The one piece of good news is that the disease seems to be progressing more slowly than in some patients, and that's direct quotes from Dwight Clark. Many people know Dwight Clark from his famous 1981 NFC Championship game where he had the catch. So before it was Odell Beckham Jr., it was Dwight Clark making the catch. It's always interesting. I mean, like I said, I don't know enough about the disease or enough about Dwight Clark overall. I know, Dave, you mentioned off the air that he's not a Hall of Famer. But I guess the first question, depending on how you want to take this conversation, is Dwight Clark a Hall of Famer at some point, and or how does this now, what do we need to care about, for Dwight Clark, aside from just supporting him going forward?
Well, first of all, obviously, my heart goes out to him and his family, but there's always going to be, now that we know more scientifically than we did 20 years ago, CTE and the link. And there's been a link to CTE and ALS and concussions and brain trauma. So again, it's another one of those sad stories potentially of a player who, had undiagnosed concussions or untreated concussions and repeated brain trauma, who now has a disease that is affecting his life, obviously in a negative way. So again, I don't know, but it's the NFL. So we've been talking about this for years now, like, oh boy, these brain trauma, concussions, and what happened with Junior Seau.
The lawsuits and all that.
And yet, the major media outlets do very little still to talk about this stuff because they know where their bread's buttered. It's buttered by the NFL. It's buttered by Roger Goodell. And it's a shame because there could be a link. And how many more players are going to go through this and have these things happen to them in the next 10, 20, 30 years until they figure it out. And I don't know that there's an answer. I don't know that there's a better helmet. I don't know that, throwing fouls for hits to the head, none of that's going to matter. You're still going to have head trauma
get hit,
in football.
Yeah.
I mean, it's almost like boxing. How do you mitigate head trauma out of boxing? You can't. Softer gloves, a better mouthpiece, you're still going to get hit in the face.
Yeah.
And in football, you're still going to get hit in the head. You might not even get hit in the head. You get hit in the chest and whip your head back and get a concussion. So I don't know what the answer is, but it's sad that he's going to have to go through this.
Now, Dwight never came out saying that this was a result of concussions or lack of protection,
specifically.
Correct?
No, but he does say here that he suspects that was the case.
Yes.
Because he said he had several brain trauma incidents throughout his career.
Yeah, and he says, and that's what you said. His direct quote, he says, I've been asked if playing football caused this. He said, I don't know for sure, but I certainly suspect it did, which rightfully so. I mean, if you played a high contact sport, no matter what the sport was for, a long time, I mean, he played it for 9 years plus, high school and college, you're going to accumulate hits to the head over time.
Correct. And even if it didn't, the narrative now is you always worry about it. You always think about it. It becomes top of mind. And I think, to me, the most disgusting thing in the whole thing isn't that it happens, because it's a rough sport. I get it. You sign up for it. I get it.
Right.
I don't like that the NFL just makes it a non-story. No. That's overblown. Really? Like, to me, that's what bothers me most about the story. Not that people are going to have degenerative brain diseases from playing that sport, but that the NFL denies that there's even a link to any of that stuff. That's what bothers me more than anything.
I agree with you, because it really is like you look at the whole thing and you're just like, how do you have this many people, attacking or accusing the NFL of all of these health issues and safety issues, and the NFL just continuously just brushing it off, being like, just coincidence, or or not even addressing it as a whole. Like, if you've got enough people accusing you that you murdered somebody, and we all know that you murdered somebody, but everybody's accusing you, eventually people are going to be like, okay, yeah, you must have killed somebody because everybody else is accusing you of it. So if you're accusing the NFL of saying, look, you're playing the game is causing these head traumas and these lifelong diseases later on, you'd like to think there's got to be a link there, that somebody has to put the pieces together and say, okay, how can we properly do it, anything we can do, really, but that's the same thing. It's the sport of football is you're meant to hit people. We can't go to flag football. We can't go to touch football because people wouldn't watch.
Right, and I don't want and understand what I'm saying. I don't want football to be banned. I don't want football to be made safer. I just want there to be warnings. Like I don't want my grandson to play full contact tackle football, but I want people to keep playing full contact football.
Right.
So does that make me a bad person? Does that make me a hypocrite? Maybe. I like watching football, but just let people know that this is the risk when you play this sport.
Yeah, I completely agree with you on that one as well. Kind of moving out of this, one of the other things we want to talk about briefly in the football world, if it's not Tim Tebow, if it's not Tom Brady, the third person that the world loves to talk about is Colin Kaepernick.
Yes.
Colin Kaepernick had a meal over the weekend with Spike Lee, and Spike Lee came out basically saying that he thought it was very fishy that Colin Kaepernick has yet to be signed by an NFL team, as he has been officially released and not by the 49ers anymore. Do you honestly think, and either one of you, do you believe that Colin Kaepernick, A, will end up on a team, and if so, is he going to be the starting quarterback?
Yes. He'll get on a team, but he will not be a starting quarterback.
Really? In what regards do you feel like he won't be a starting quarterback? Because he's still young. He's only 29 years old, so in some people's minds, that's still prime playing age.
I personally believe that there are too many franchises that are building around a younger quarterback that's coming out of college. Look at a variety of different teams that are, focusing just around the quarterback. Look at Indianapolis. When Andrew Luck came out, they put everything around Andrew Luck.
Yeah.
And they're riding that horse all the way to the pasture, I guess you could kind of say. But, I think Colin Kaepernick can be a risk. I think he can be the unwanted attention that the team might not want. Everybody wants to have a little bit of attention, but do you want to have the positive versus the negative attention? Is it the Terrell Owens of the world, or is it the Colin Kaepernicks? Either way, I think he's a quality quarterback. I think he has attributes to every team. The way he can scramble, and he can throw the ball. I mean, look what he did against the Packers. I mean, yes, the Packers' defensive backs weren't the greatest in the world, but he still was effective, and he got him to championships and the Super Bowl and so forth. But I think right now it's too much that a team's willing to take on, kind of like a Johnny Manziel or anything like that.
I agree.
Yeah, listen, I think he'll end up on a team. If he might start if the starter gets hurt or you have some ineffective play. Ryan Fitzpatrick's not signed. Kind of fishy. But
you heard it here first.
But here's the thing. They're obviously anti-Harvard or something. But here's the problem I have with it. First of all, he had a really good season. One really good season.
Yeah.
And unless he's scheduled to play the Packers 16 times, I don't think he's going to repeat
That's my
that
biggest
season.
point with that. Yes.
Right. So you can say, well, okay, is he a decent backup? Okay, maybe he's a decent backup. Maybe he'd be a guy that could be on your team. But if I'm an owner, it's still my brand.
Right.
So if I want to protect my brand and I don't want to take a chance on a guy who's a second or third string quarterback, I don't have to do that. He'll find a job. But if he could still play and still make you a winner, owners will overlook all that other stuff if he can win you a Super Bowl. I just don't think he's that guy anymore.
How much of the argument changes if we never have these national anthem protests? If it's just Colin Kaepernick and maybe his career, he still has the exact same career. We just don't. He just never protests.
We're not having the conversation right now.
Would we just say that he's just a free agent, that maybe he'll get on a team?
Well, of course.
We're not attaching all this other baggage to it.
Correct.
Obviously.
I think he just fades off. He fades off like other quarterbacks have in the past, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, Kaepernick plays for who?
Yeah.
And
on the Jaguars now? What?
Sounds
strange.
Good.
I think Colin Kaepernick continues to achieve what he wanted all along. Just my opinion. You can disagree with it. He wanted this notoriety a little bit on him, not just for whatever he felt he was standing for. And I don't think what he stood for was wrong. I think the way he did it was wrong. But I think he wanted a lot of this to be about him, and it continues to be about him, even in the free agent offseason when he hasn't been signed.
That's true. All right, last thing I want to talk about with you guys here before we get out for the day, because we've got college road trip coming up here in just a little under 20 minutes, which is going to be an exciting time. I don't know if you've been paying attention to the NBA very much. I don't do it too often. I'll tune in occasionally if there's a game in on ABC or ESPN, but the big stink right now has nothing to do with the MVP race. It has nothing to do with triple doubles or Kawhi Leonard or any of that other stuff. It's centered around certain NBA teams sitting their star players when it comes to nationally televised games. The biggest thing that recently happened was the big three for the Cleveland Cavaliers sat on national television when the Cavaliers played the Clippers. The Clippers ultimately ended up winning the game. And everybody just had a stink about it because this was a nationally televised game. How are we supposed to build the brand of the NBA if we're never showing the biggest players? It's LeBron James. It's the Michael Jordan. You have to show LeBron James. Is this just all ridiculous? These guys aren't animals. You can't work them to the bone. Like, they have to rest. They're humans.
It is ridiculous because if I'm the coach of that team and I'm trying to put myself in the best, especially look at Cleveland. They've had injuries.
Yeah,
they've had injuries to Irving. They have injuries to Love. They've had injuries all year. So I'm trying to protect my best players for the grind that is the NBA playoffs. I should have the right to do that. Now you say, well, it's a national televised game. Maybe you should wait. Most of the Cavalier games are nationally televised games.
Yeah.
So when do you get to pick? So now
you get maybe like 6 games a year.
You get that Tuesday game against New Jersey. You can take that one off because that's not a national. Like, how do you decide that? I think you can't legislate that because you should be able to protect your best players, your best commodities, and protect your best chance to win a championship.
I agree. I completely agree with you on that one as well.
What do they want? Do they want to see their top 3 perform now, or do they want a championship at the end of the year?
Well, I get it from a team perspective. Like, if I'm the head coach of the Cavaliers, I'm going to be like, look, I'm going to rest my players when I see fit because I want to win a championship, because the NBA playoffs especially are ridiculously long, and a whole other conversation for another time. But
maybe there's smarter ways to do. Maybe you rest one guy Monday, one guy Wednesday, but still, like you still can't tell teams don't rest your guys.
Yeah.
And again, when you have teams like them, like Golden State, like
they rested
like Cleveland,
their 4 big guys. Golden State did a couple of weeks ago against San Antonio in a marquee matchup.
Right.
And everybody lost their minds. They're like, how in the world is this game even going to happen? Because the big 4 for Golden State isn't even going to be on the court for this game.
Right, but 75% of those teams I just mentioned, all their games are on national TV.
Yeah.
So you can't do anything about it anyway.
You're right. You're absolutely right. Is there an actual solution for it? Probably not. Is the NBA going to say, look, we're going to fine you if you don't have your players do anything on national television? And somebody brought this up at the lunchtime show. The English Premier League fines their teams £15,000 for if they don't play their star players when they have nationally televised games.
Don't get me started on soccer, please.
I know, but I'm just saying, regardless of the sport, though, if the Yankees were playing the Red Sox, back when Jeter and A-Rod, they both sat.
Well, if the Yankees are playing the Red Sox, every game's on ESPN because somehow baseball stops when those two teams play because there's nothing else going on.
Always.
But I understand the sentiment, and I guess the NBA tried. They've extended the All-Star break to try to give players more rest. But if you're All-Star, you're not really getting that much rest. You're still traveling. You're still doing the introduction show. You're still playing in the game. But they're trying to make some things in season go a little bit better so you don't have to rest as much. But again, when you're a team that's been snake-bitten with injuries all year, you're going to err to the side of caution.
I completely agree with both of you gentlemen. Well, I want to take a moment to thank both of you for being on the show today. I know it's a little bit shorter than our normal show, but some great insight from both of you. Any final thoughts from either of you about anything that we've covered today, or just your other 2 cents you want to throw out there so people have your full thoughts and opinion about it all?
I'm just curious on what's your pick now with Wisconsin? Who you got in the bracket?
Well, my Final Four is a little wonky now, just in the sense that now that who is it? I've lost one Final Four team. I lost Virginia. So my Final Four currently is Gonzaga, Michigan, and UNC. So I'm hopeful that UNC can get through can get through Butler, and then whoever they play with, UCLA or Kentucky. But Wisconsin, I mean, if I'm going just from a fan perspective, I'd like to say Wisconsin has a chance to make it to at least the Elite Eight. I think Florida's a good team, but I think the Badgers have enough shooters to get past the Gators' defense.
I already lost half of my Final Four. I lost Louisville and Villanova. I just want to say this is an amazing project, amazing setup you have going on, and I've been a huge fan of the things you've done for quite a while. So
well, thank you, Scott. I really appreciate that. It means a lot to me. So I appreciate that. Dave, thank you so much. Scott, also a pleasure. A reminder for all of you as well, too, to go check out our website, brewsportsnet.com. You can get all the latest videos and information about the network there. Make sure to give us a follow and a like on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram as well, at BrewSportsNet. Use the hashtag BrewSports as well to interact with us on social media. Coming up next, it will be the college road trip from 5 to 6 p.m. with Barry Nelson. Don't forget to tune in for that for all of you college sports lovers. We'll be back here again tomorrow as well on the network, starting from 4 to 5 p.m. Central Time here on Happy Hour. For Dave Pentek and Scott Wisniewski, I'm Baxter Colburn. Thanks to Christian Heimall for joining us as well. We'll see you guys tomorrow on Happy Hour, and we'll see you, the viewer, a little bit later on for College Road Trip right here on Brew Sports Network. We'll talk to you guys soon. Thanks again for watching.